A History of Southern Missouri and Northern Arkansas by William Monks. Published in 1907. Rebels Capture Colonel Monks, and Billy, You Ought Not to Be So Saucy. On the 7th of July, 1861, one of my neighbors came to me and informed me that the time had come that every Union man had to show his colors, and unless they reported and took the oath or joined the Confederate Army, they would hang as high as Haman. While the Union men were on their guard and watching their movements, once in a while they would slip in home to see how the family was getting along. My family at that time consisted of a wife and 4 children, 3 girls and 1 boy. My wife had never been accustomed to staying alone, and I came in home late on the evening of the 7th, thinking that I would leave the next morning before daylight. Some time after the family had retired, not far from 11 o'clock in the night, I was awakened by a rapping on the door. My wife, suspecting who the parties were, answered them and demanded to know what was wanted. One of them, who claimed to be an orderly sergeant, remarked that he wanted to know if Monks was at home. She replied that he was not. A man by the name of William Biffle, whom the author had been acquainted with for years, replied, "He is here, I know, for I coursed him into this house late yesterday evening." The author at once arose to his feet and remarked, "I am here. What is wanted?" A man by the name of Garrett Weaver, who claimed to be an orderly sergeant and in charge of the squad, also a neighbor to the author, said, "I have been ordered by General McBride to arrest you, bring you in, and make you take the oath." I owned at that time a first-class rifle, and there was also another rifle gun in the house. I took my gun into my hands, and my wife took hold of the other gun. I told them that a general order had gone forth, so I was informed that they wanted to hang all the leading Union men, and if that is your intention, I will die before I surrender. Weaver replied they were not going to hang me, but they were just going to take me to McBride to take the oath, and I should be protected. Upon those terms I agreed to surrender, made a light in the house, and found that the house was surrounded by a posse of 25 rebels. As soon as the light was made, a part of them rushed into the house, took my gun, and jerked the one my wife had in her hand out of her possession, almost throwing her to the floor. Began a general search of the house for other arms and such things as they said the army needed. As soon as I dressed, they ordered me to move. They didn't even give me time to say goodbye to my wife, nor to imprint a kiss upon the cheeks of my loving children. Closely surrounded me, they marched me about 250 yards, came to their horses, where 2 more of their posse guarded the horses, they having dismounted to approach the house on foot so they might not be heard. "Billy, you ought not to be so saucy." When within a few feet of the horses, the author was halted. It was just starlight. I noticed a man by the name of Wilburn Baker, a man with whom the author had been acquainted from a boy, go to the horn of one of the saddles, lift therefrom a coiled rope, and move toward the author. The author quickly arrived at the conclusion that the time had come to enforce the order of hanging. Baker ordered the author seized by the arms, drew them behind him, and securely tied him. The author asked, just as they had completed the tying, "What do you mean? Are you going to cage me?" Baker replied, "Billy, you ought not to be so saucy, for you don't know the danger you are in. I was at once ordered placed on a horse. One of the posse rode up to my side and placed the other end of the rope around his body, and the posse moved west. A short time before daylight, they arrived at the house of William Nix, who was a rebel lieutenant. They dismounted and took the author into the house. There appeared to be a general rejoicing among them. Nix said, "You have got him, have you? We had become uneasy about you and thought it might have been possible that he had his Union forces around him and that you had met with disaster. But I feel satisfied that we have now captured the leader and the counselor of the Union forces, and the remainder will be easily extinguished." General McBride, in the meantime, being uneasy for fear the Federal troops would attack him, had removed his forces from West Plains to the south part of Howell County, camping at what was known as the Flag Pond. I was closely guarded until daylight. McBride's forces had broken camp at the Flag Pond on the morning of July 8th and were marching west with the intention of joining the forces of General Price and General McCullough, who were then moving in the direction of Springfield, Missouri, with the intention of attacking the Federal forces at that place, commanded by General Lyon and General Sigel. Very early on the morning of the 8th, the party started in the southwest direction, with the author closely guarded. On coming near the head of Bennett's River, Fulton County, Arkansas, the posse commenced cheering and remarked, "Listen, do you hear the drums and the fife? That is General McBride's command moving west to kill them lop-eared Dutch that you Union men have brought into the state of Missouri. Do you know what we are going to do with such men as you are? Those of you that we don't hang, the first fight that we get into with the lop-eared Dutch, we will make breastworks out of to keep the bullets off of good men." About 1 mile further, we came in sight of the moving column. We rode along the line when there was general cheering until we reached a company that was organized in Oregon County and commanded by Captain Simpson. Simpson said, "Why have you brought a Union man in here alive? If my company had possession of him, he could not live 10 minutes. We soon reached a company commanded by Captain Saucy, which was organized in this county, to whom the whole posse that made the arrest belonged. The author was well acquainted with all of them, and over half of them resided in the same settlement and were his neighbors. On reaching the company, Captain Saucy walked out of the line and remarked to them, "Why have you brought him in here alive?" Some of the posse remarked that he had been a neighbor, and they had all been friends up to the war, and they hated to kill him. Saucy said, "When I saw him at West Plains at the speaking, when he got up and contended that there was a Union and the government ought to be preserved, I wanted to shoot his black heart out of him, and I feel the same way yet." The author was kept in close confinement, and on the night of the 8th, the command went into camp near what is known as the old Steve Thompson farm. The author, with several other prisoners, was placed in the guardhouse, and orders were given that he be closely guarded. After they had taken their suppers, men that the author had been acquainted with from his boyhood, and men who had been acquainted with his relatives, came to the guardhouse in considerable numbers and remarked, "Hello, monks. I never expected to see you under arrest. What have you been doing that they have arrested you? I thought you was a good Democrat. Have you left your party?" "The Democratic Party is in favor of the South." The author replied to them that when they thought he was a good Democrat, they were right, but that he was not a slave to party, and that he held country higher than party, and if democracy meant secession and nullification, that was one part of the principles of democracy that he had never learned. That true democracy, as understood by the author, taught every man that in case his country was invaded, either externally or internally, that he owed his honor and property in the support of it, and for those reasons he was for the preservation of the Union at all hazards. Some remarked that we have to hang him right now without waiting any longer. Others remarked that We have been acquainted with his people both on his mother's and father's side, and they are all Southern people and Democrats, and they are all of them almost in favor of the South. It is strange indeed to see the course that he has taken." The author remarked that there were always some shabby sheep in a flock, and I suppose from your reason that I am one of them. They all retired, the officers giving orders that the most vigilant watch be kept over the prisoner. After he had retired, a gentleman by the name of Joseph Teverball, who resided in Ozark County, a merchant and the owner of about 20 negroes, who had been well acquainted with the author from his boyhood, brought up the conversation as to what disposition they thought ought to be made of the author. The author could easily hear all the conversation inside of the guard line. Many opinions were expressed. Quite a number said, "Hang him outright." That was the only way to get shut of the Union men, to make short work of it, and forever rid the country of that element. Others said that appeared to be too harsh, that they were in favor of taking him to Little Rock and confining him in the penitentiary until the war was over, for it wouldn't take but a short time to rid the country of the lop-eared Dutch and those who were friends to them. Others remarked that that would be too easy for a man who was in favor of the lop-eared Dutch, that we are in favor of taking all like him right into the army and making them fight, and if they won't fight, the first engagement we get into, pile them up and make breastworks out of them, so that they will catch bullets off of good men. At this juncture, Teverball remarked, "I have been acquainted with Billy from a boy, and you never can force him to fight against what he believes to be right. That he was a good boy, and since he has grown up to be a man, he has been an honorable and straightforward man and quite an active man politically. And my advice would be to confine him in the state penitentiary until the war is over. For I tell you now, if he ever gains his liberty, you are going to have him to fight."